Yeah.
Okay, so welcome again to our webinar number 10, co-organized by Finance and Banking Network and Economic Policy Network. Both networks are members of AVSE Global. My name is Nguyen. I am Assistant Professor in Accounting at University of Nottingham, UK, and I'm an executive member of Finance and Banking Network. I will be co-host this webinar together with Mr. Nguyen, a rising star from Massey University, New Zealand. We would like to kick off the new year with a very interesting and meaningful webinar about publication and impact. First of all, I would like to say thank you to our speaker today, Dr. Subhan Ullah, Associate Professor in Accounting, Departmental Research Director, University of Nottingham, UK. And thank you, Subhan.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah.
Let me have a short introduction about our speaker, Dr. Subhan, before he starts his presentation. Dr. Subhan Ullah is Associate Professor in Accounting and Departmental Research Director at Nottingham University Business School. He's a member of the Advisory Board of Research Policy Think Tank, Alternate Solution Institute, Pakistan. Dr. Subhan is currently Associate Editor at International Journals of Finance and Economics. This is a ABS 3-star journals. And he also Associate Editor at Environment, Development and Sustainability. Subhan is a Senior Fellow of Higher Education Academy and is a member of CBA Australia. He researched in the area of corporate governance, financial reporting, climate finance, which appears in many leading international journals, such as British Journals of Management, Critical Perspective on Accounting, International Review of Financial Analysis, International Journals of Finance and Economics, Annals of Operation Research, Journals of Business Research, Industrial Marketing Management, Technological Forecasting and Social Change, Journals of Environmental Management, and others. He has been involved in several impactful research projects as well, including the ESRC-funded projects on women's voice in fragile context. His research on governance and COVID crisis appears on the website of leading international policy-making bodies, like the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, World Health Organization, and the Global Innovation magazines. He frequently appears on television talk shows in Pakistan, and his work is featured in leading international media outlets like Foreign Policy News and The Conservation. Dr. Subhan has more than 30 papers and book chapters published in many international excellent peer-reviewed journals. Therefore, his sharing about publication and impact would be very helpful for us. So to save our time, I would like to invite Dr. Subhan to start his presentation, and over to you, Subhan.
Thank you very much, Tom, for a generous introduction, and hi, both of you, for inviting me to this session. It's a great pleasure to talk to young researchers, PhD students, early career researchers. Those particularly I can see from the participant list are all from developing countries, and as an academic from developing country, it is our, I think, moral responsibility as well that we contribute back to where we are coming from. It's not only we set up our careers, raise our families, and basically forget about supporting others. That's something I really like for academics from those regions. So and it's always a pleasure to share experiences with young researchers, develop them, co-author paper with them, and support them. So I mean, the presentation would be a bit longer for those who have already published. So I would be going sometime through some of the basic things. But if you feel you got any questions and you want to leave early, do ask your question. Please do raise your hand and interrupt me at any time. I'm quite flexible on that. And as I mentioned, I would be targeting fresh researchers. So for some of you, the concept might be quite basics, but I would also be touching on the publishing industry in journal as well, and how we can position ourselves in terms of producing world-class high quality output. Now, I'm moving my slides. Let me see. Yeah. Now, as you can see, it's a painful process. It's not an easy journey. And as an academic, if you are a PhD student and you want to pursue an academic career, you need to be preparing yourself for these challenges. There would be ups, there would be downs, and there would be a lot of rejections. And if you receive a rejection, you receive second rejection, you receive a third rejection, you shouldn't give up. If you gave up, basically, it means you are in the wrong place. You should join industry, or you should have your own business, or you should be doing some consultancy work. So that's something to start with, that you should start with a big heart as a researcher, and position yourself in such a way that you don't see rejection as something very strange. So this is something we are starting with. Okay. Now let me just remove the camera slightly here so I can see what appears on my screen. Now everybody has received rejections, but the publishing industry is changing. The landscape is changing. As you can see on my slide here, this is an article which was published last week by somebody in the University of Manchester. And the co-author is, you can see, ChatGPT. You can see here, it's an artificial intelligence. A computer is basically a co-author. So now this put a lot of pressure as well as challenges for us, that we are not only working with human beings, but we will also be working with machines in futures. So I found it quite interesting to see, especially for those who have already published, how the landscape is changing and where we have to position ourselves basically in 10, 15 years time. So whether we would need Stata, SPSS, these softwares, or whether these artificial intelligence would be doing all the work for us, the data collection, analysis. And so basically you got a computer as a co-author. That's basically the main story coming from this. I think 20 years, 30 years before, things were different. So by the time we retire, the industry dynamics would be different. So this is again for young researchers, PhD students, to think ahead in 10, 15 years, 20 years time. And if we look into publications, there are a couple of journal questions that we should start with, and there are several reasons that we publish in academic journals. The obvious reason is we want career progressions, we want promotions, and everybody is doing publication for those reasons. But at some stage in your careers where you have achieved the promotions, the progressions, you might see this as a something for recognition and self-esteem as well. I mean, we academics, we when you receive a Google citation alert, you get happier. You don't get paid for it, but you see, okay, my work is acknowledged. Somebody has cited my work. And obviously, we are all working in different universities in different countries, and this is an institutional requirement. Our universities are pushing us. I think somebody's microphone is on. So can everybody please switch off the microphone? Yeah. So that's a university requirement as well to publish in top ranking journals. And obviously there are countries where you get paid if you are publishing in the form of rewards, in the form of bonuses, cash bonuses, non-cash bonuses. So this is obviously again positioning yourself, where you work, what is your aim? Are you doing this all for your self-esteem and recognition, or for career progressions and promotions? So it's important to clarify where you fit basically in this domain. And this is a recent survey on the quality of research in the UK and how the UK RIF environment has basically changed the publication landscape and the quality of research in the UK. So it's a very interesting survey available online. If you Google this title, the UK RIF and Impact on Research Quality, and you would see that this research assessment exercise at national level, whether it's in the UK, in France, in Australia, or any other country, has created huge pressures on universities, on academics, to not only publish, but also to produce more and more paper. And that quantity has basically somehow affected the quality. So we need a good balance between quality and quantity. This is one of the points I would discuss later. And somehow we also need to understand that the research we do has public relevance, and much of the research published in the UK, according to this survey, has public relevance. But there are studies which are published on topics which basically nobody is going to read, nobody is going to download, and nobody is even going to bother to read the abstract. So I think we need to be very, very careful, and there is a lot of basically gameplay, and those are the things that you also need to understand, that it's not an easy field to be a player in, and you need to be very, very smart, particularly if you want to pursue a research career. There are issues of integrity with people using the same data and applying different models, producing papers. That's not good. Novelty is an issue. Obviously, if you are producing too many papers, it's very difficult to bring in novelty, which is again related with authenticity. So this is something just to begin with the broader picture to understand before you are starting publishing. And if you look into the publishing landscape, different countries have different requirements. And this is also, again, this journal rankings, metrics-driven culture is basically putting a lot of pressures on us. So for example, I would give you one example. If in the UK, we are very ABS crazy. Australian academics ABDC ranking. In many developing countries, Asia and Africa, it's SCI ranking publication. And that basically restrict us from collaborating with each other, because the person with whom you are working would be doing very good quality research, but he or she is more conscious to publish in SCI, SSCI, you are conscious to publish ABS, ABDC ranking. So this is again an issue which needs to be carefully looked into by the policymakers, by the national level regulatory bodies, because it's not promoting a healthy research culture. If you're looking into the challenges in the global South, then you need to get a right forum where those challenges are basically, well, people are accepting those ideas. And this is something, I think, again, a very political thing. I won't discuss it in more detail here, but this is a problem which people are recognizing. So when you're starting publishing, initially, you might be throwing your article anywhere, but there are some important questions to ask yourself, and those are the basic questions: which journals you want to publish, which area you want to publish. The area is very important. We all are coming from business school, economics, accounting, finance, social sciences, but the topic that we are choosing is very, very important. We don't need to be just looking into databases, Bloomberg, Thomson One, DataStream, WRDS, collecting these big data in Excel sheet and running regressions in time series, panel data models, and then basically producing output. Rather, we should be looking into the long-term impact of our research, with who is going to benefit from our work, how our work is relevant to businesses, to non-government organizations, to the society. Those are the important questions. And obviously, we need to keep a good balance between quantity and quality. I have seen academics publishing 100 papers a year, 120 papers a year. That's basically a paper like a week, for example. It's not healthy, it's not sustainable. And my advice to young researcher is you need a good balance between quality and quantity. So if you're publishing a couple of papers in a year, I think that's very good. Even one paper a year is also quite ideal. And obviously, with whom you are publishing is also very important. I would briefly discuss that on the coming slide, how to find a good co-authors team. But if there is any question, please do interrupt me at any time. Do ask question. Now, when it comes to collaborations, it's very important in research that you may have seen people publishing single authored papers, okay? Now, when you look into those CVs, it looks quite inspiring. Somebody has published 10 papers. They are all single authored papers. But this does raise a question about the collegiality of that person. Is this person flexible? Why this person didn't collaborate? People would be putting question marks about the friendliness and about the collegiality of that particular person. Yes, single authored papers are good, but you need to be working with people as a team in your own department where you are working, in your own university, in other departments. So I'm an accounting academic. I have published with people in finance department, in economics, in marketing, in human resource, in logistics and supply chain. So that's flexibility is very important. And we all sometimes are using quite similar approaches in the business world, because the people you are working with, they are also from the business school. They are not from the medical school. So remember, do not restrict yourself. And interdisciplinary research is highly encouraged by many universities. And then you also need to look for international co-authors. It would be great if you have in 10 years, 15 years time down the line, if you put your publication on a global map, you can see, okay, I have papers co-authored with academics in Vietnam, in Malaysia, in China, in India, in Pakistan, in the UK, in Europe. And that's what means that you are not only flexible, but you are also supporting researchers, PhD students in those regions in developing their careers. So this is just a quick example. I think something which is called SciWall. If you haven't used, you can Google it on elsewhere. It can show you the statistics from Scopus, how many papers you have co-authors with at national level and at international level. So here you can see 60% of my papers are co-authored with academics internationally. And you can also check this for yourself. Just Google SciWall elsewhere, and you would see your own statistics. So people, institutions are gradually using these matrices to look into their researchers' profile. And it is also used by the headhunters, by the recruitment agencies when they are recruiting for top academics and professors in the field. Now, This is quite interesting here. And I think some of you who are PhD students, who are early career researchers, you really need to think about it, particularly if you are thinking about publishing papers. So with whom you want to publish? Obviously, everybody's dream to publish papers with those Nobel Prize winners in economics, in other areas. It's very, very ambitious. It's not impossible, obviously. Uh, and this is something, one question I'm presenting to the audience. The second one is, you got an option to publish with academic who is retiring in a month time. So you can see whether the academic has a motivation to publish at that stage of the career or not. So if I'm retiring in a month time, obviously I won't care. That's a simple answer to that. And if you are publishing with somebody who has a huge administrative responsibility, like executive dean, or somebody who's like a pro vice chancellor, or somebody who's very busy with paperwork and other administrative duties. So the academic won't get time basically to read your papers. So you need to be very careful who you are. I'm not saying I'm discouraging, remember, but you need somebody who can read your work, who can give you feedback, and who can basically reply to your emails as well. People who are very busy, they won't reply. And somebody who is a mid-career researcher, somebody who is an early career researcher, just completed a PhD and is excited to publish. And then you got somebody who is very fresh, who has no idea about journals, and who is basically in the middle of the PhD. So the person doing PhD would be very helpful in data collection, in doing those data codes, softwares, these type of work. And an early career researcher, for example, would be helpful in writing, in writing, in finding a good academic outlet for your journal. So these are very basic questions. Obviously, there might be others which I may have missed. Now, here on this slide, you can see some common reasons for rejections, and some of those examples you can see. You can also apply to your own rejection letters, but obviously I would share some of my own examples from my own rejection experience. So, I mean, the obvious rejection reason is that your research has no contribution or limited contribution, or you're doing something which is already exhausted. Everybody has published in that area, and it's very difficult to find a contribution. Let me give you a simple example of this. When I was doing PhD back in 2011, when I started, I was doing research on corporate governance and the performance of firms. And at that time, my supervisor was telling me that the traditional, these are the wordings I'm using here, that the traditional governance performance research is dying. And I have to find other areas to explore. And this was a very good point. At this point, if you want to publish on corporate governance firm performance, it's very, very difficult. If you use Google Scholar, you will find thousands of papers on this topic. So those type of topics which are heavily investigated, I won't go in that domain. Obviously, when the results are too obvious, when you read the title of the paper, you can also predict what type of outcome you would be reporting in your papers. When you got poor analysis, and you can see that from the econometrics that you have applied. And here I would give you one simple example. If you look into the Journal of Finance and look into the papers published in the Journal of Finance back in 1980, 1990, those papers were using simple OLS regressions. But if you look into Journal of Finance now, it's so difficult to publish with OLS. It's impossible. And that's the same with every journal. So OLS was basically an acceptable methodology in 90s, in 80s. Now nobody is going to accept that method. You have to apply more robust econometric techniques, whether that is GMM or whether that is instrumental variables or other recent techniques. So you need to be up to the mark when it comes to the methodological developments. And then we have seen papers where people are basically collecting so many variables from a database without looking into the theoretical relevance of those variables. So you browse Bloomberg database, see something relevant, put them in the regression model, run results, produce good tables. But then when it comes to story, that story is missing. Because for a good article, it's not only about reporting so many regression tables, you need a good story. And that story starts from the title, from your abstract, from introduction, literature review. And inappropriate estimation is when, as I mentioned, I have given you example of the OLS models. I'm not saying it's totally flawed, but you would struggle to publish with OLS. And similarly, as an associate editor, I have seen many errors in the econometric models, in the main results, in the robustness tests. People are using it incorrectly, and that can be quite problematic, especially if somebody with econometric expertise pick that later on in 10 years time, in 15 years time. You would be professor at that time, and you would be in big troubles. People would be writing about it. So one need to be very, very careful with methodologies, with the descriptive statistics that you report. There shouldn't be basic errors. If you have basic errors in your descriptive statistics, as I mentioned, in 10 years, 20 years time, you are professor internationally renowned. It would be a shame to somebody say and pick it, oh, this is what you have published. And the other important point is people, particularly in the business discipline, we don't have our own theories. We borrow theories from sociology, psychology, human resource, from other disciplines. And sometimes we basically try to plug in a theory without finding a good relevance of the theory. So that can also become quite problematic. And the other issue, reason for common rejection is the data is quite old sometimes, and that can become problematic, because if you are talking about recent issues, say climate change, you should be using some recent data to inform policy in the area. If you're using 2010, 2011 data, and you are making recommendations for people now, basically that's not making any sense. Contribution, we discussed that before. I won't talk about it a lot. It's mainly about your theoretical, your methodological contribution, your contribution to practice, and that should be very well highlighted in the introduction of the paper. Usually you need a decent paragraph highlighting the contribution of the paper, and be explicit using the word contribution several times, because sometimes your paper has a contribution, but you are shy to highlight it, and that people won't notice it from the reading. Finally, most importantly, I'm not using the words plagiarism, it's similarity, where you don't see the score, but the people in the system, the editors, they can see the similarity score, and if that score is higher, your paper may get disk rejected, or even if you receive major revisions, the editors may also look into the score and say, okay, I'm not very supportive of this paper, because the way you have written your literature review is very much from the previous work, and it's not very good. Okay, now this is another important slide on choosing the right co-authors. There are stories of good, successful co-authorship, and there are stories of painful co-authorship. And you can see here, and I mean, I would start with the positive one with good co-authors. If you have published, you would have some experience. And this is a paper published in the British Accounting Review. The title is "With a Little Help from Our Friends, an Empirical Investigation of Co-authoring in Accounting Research." Very good paper. It's a qualitative papers, not high quality, not high-fi econometrics. You would enjoy reading it. So the benefits of co-authorship are that everybody brings something to the party. So you are good in econometrics, another person is good in the data collection. He or she got access to world prestigious database. Another person is very good in writing a story. That person would be helpful in the developing your theoretical framework, in writing your literature review. So if everybody is good in econometrics, who is going to write the papers? So you need to keep a good balance. So you learn from each other's when and you read the writing of others. Don't just paste in your own section in the paper. You have to read that so that you can make a connection with different sections. Otherwise, people won't enjoy reading your papers. And obviously, if you work as a co-author with other academics, it enhances your productivity and your efficiency because you work on a specialized area, say, for example, on the econometric side, and the other person is working on another side. And obviously, you share co-authorship when you work in a team. It's not like you can see on the left-hand side, the difficult co-authors conflict over the order of authorship. If I work in a team and every time I want to be the first author, I'm going to lose the team. So I have worked with co-authors, with the team of researchers. We have several successful publications. Hi is here. We have published some papers. So you have to rotate co-authorship based on obviously your contribution. But if you always say, stick, I want to be the first author like a child, I want it, the people won't work with you. People would run away from you at some point, maybe after years, 2 years. This is something very important. And there are people who would disagree with the econometrics that you have applied. You got difficult people as well. In academia, there are, I mean, you know, there are mental health problems, and you need to understand other people's opinion, and you have to be supportive, particularly if when you are working with difficult co-authors. And then you got people who would be sending you email. I will send you my part of the paper in a month time, and you don't even receive it in 1 year time. So some people basically, they don't deliver, and then you got exploitative behavior where some academics would basically be exploiting young early career researchers. You do all the data collection, the data analysis, you write the paper, and then I say, oh, now I want to be the first author. That's not acceptable. You should have the confidence and the courage to say no, because you will find there are thousands of universities around the world. You will find a co-author. But your own personal principles, you should not compromise it, particularly when it comes to exploitative behavior. And then there you got personality clashes between co-authors. We are all different human beings coming from different cultures, different backgrounds. We have different thinking, different cognitive abilities, and you would always see conflict of interest when it comes to individuals. Now, what I would suggest for new researchers is to read this section, Guide for Authors. It's usually a couple of pages, 4 or 5 pages, but many of us, we don't read it. We prepare a paper and agree, okay, we want to send it to the Journal of Corporate Finance. And without reading the word limit, without reading there are minor details, the font size, the referencing styles, the number of tables, images that you have to use. So there are small details that you have to follow. Some journals will ask you to say, for example, when it comes to references and you're submitting to, say, for example, the critical perspective on accounting, and you have no reference from critical perspective on accounting, what kind of message you are sending to the journal, to the editors? You need, I think, decent number of papers to read from that journal, 7, 8 papers, so that you are engaging with the academic discourse in that journal. If you don't cite from that journal, it would signal that people won't cite your work as well if they are submitting. So this is a simple message you are sending to the journals. And there are journals which would require you to send or share your data, your stata commands, your SPSS, or sorry, your SAS commands, Python commands, whatever software you're using. And this is again for research integrity purpose. If somebody else want to use the data on the commands, it should be readily available. And if the journals are even not asking, you should have it somewhere in the system in a safe place, because in 10 years time, 15 years time, as I mentioned, if somebody queries your result, journal may come back to you. Your email is there, your name is there. So, so you should be readily available to share it if there is a big problem. Now, when I'm finding a home for my article, I will try to explore the top ranking journals. We'll quickly read the first 2-3 lines of the aims and scopes of that journal. So looking into the accounting review, for example, it says, should accounting review, the scope of acceptable articles should embrace any research methodology. So they're open to qualitative, quantitative methodologies. Journal of Accounting and Economics, you can see economic analysis, heavily econometrics, I would say quantitative fashion type research. And then you got Journal of Accounting Research, which is accepting article from discipline like economics, stats, psychology, sociology. British Accounting Review is accepting, say, for example, journals from articles from both accounting and finance discipline. So this gives you an idea where basically to pitch your article. And this is very important because initially, as a new researcher, you would like to publish anywhere, in management journal, in business journal, in finance, in economics. But at some point you have to think, if I'm a finance journal, how many articles I have published in the finance journals? People would be asking you this question as well. And this would be asked when it comes to promotions, when it comes to career development. So don't publish randomly here and there, I would say. But stay in the business discipline, that's important. If you publish in engineering journals, in management, in science journals, and you are a social science person, you are a business researcher, this may become problematic, particularly when it comes to employability, when it comes to switching the jobs, because you would not like to be staying at the same organizations for many years. Now, this is again a quick overview of the Journal of Business, Finance and Accounting, aim and scope. I would read the wordings to see what type of topics they are welcoming. And I would talk to people as well. So if you talk to somebody who has published in critical perspective on accounting, I would say, if you got a quantitative paper, don't send it there. And the same is with JBFA, for example, qualitative papers. I think they are not highly encouraged to be submitted to these journals. So this is again something that would gradually come when you talk to people. You cannot randomly send papers to journals without understanding the psychology of people publishing, the psychology of people sitting on the editorial board of those journals. Now, this is again a slide which I have prepared on finding a suitable team. You need to look for a diverse team of researchers from different institutions. It looks very good when you have a paper published where you are an author from one institution, another one is, say, for example, from a very good other university. Third author is international from another country. Fourth author is also an international from another university. And in this way, basically, it means that you are flexible, you are approachable. The people would also understand your psychology of working. And as I mentioned, different people have different working style. You would see people just publishing by themselves, people publishing with people in the same department, not publishing with anybody else, and read their profile, their publication profile. You will get an idea. And you need somebody who can be very strong on the writing side. So that person, and this is what I do basically when I look for a team. Hi is here, we have worked. I need somebody who is very good in writing the introduction and literature review, somebody who's good with data collection, data and other software. That person is wholly responsible. We all have meetings together. We cannot do this all in isolation. If you work independently without communicating with each other, then you would come up with things which are not connected pieces, basically, and people would struggle to read those papers. And then somebody is responsible for the writing the findings and conclusions. So I think 4 people are generally sufficient. I won't encourage publishing with more than 4 people. And in 5-10 years time, when you have 25-30 papers, people would also be looking into your order of co-authorship. If you are number 4 authors on all your 20 papers, people in the recruitment panels, they would be questioning, what is your role there? You are not a principal author. So there are always points to pick when it comes to the order of. You don't need to be first author in all papers, but you need to have papers where you are the principal investigator. And you also need to highlight your contribution in the paper, 25%, 30% contribution. It would vary. In some paper, you would have 50% contribution. So write the percentage of contribution on your CV for each of your paper that you have published. So any questions so far? Sorry, I was speaking one-sided, so it would be good if there is any question I can take.
Yeah, thank you much, Subhan. There's a question from the chat that one person asked, where can I publish a research for free as a student? Yeah, good question. I would try to avoid journals which are basically charging a lot of money. There are journals where you pay $2,000, $3,000. There are some known journals. I won't mention their name, but I would avoid those journals. And there are several high-ranking journals where there is no submission fee. International Journal of Finance and Economics, for example, where I work, is basically not charging any submission fee. And there are other journals where there is no, you don't need to pay any submission fee. Yeah. Any other question from participants before we move? Okay. You can switch on your microphone as well if you got any question.
Okay, now, once you have prepared a manuscript, you need a very, very strong, convincing covering letter, short one. And I generally prefer to write a covering letter on the university letterhead. And if you send a covering letter on institutional letterhead, it gives a very positive signal to the editor, because people, the editors, the associate editors, they are also academics. They are also human being working in university. So it's good to be very, very professional and start with writing a very good covering letter for your paper. And that's for every paper, whether you're writing for a top ranking journal or for a low ranking journal. It's good to be to have a very good covering letters. I think I have mentioned this already, so I won't spend time here, but there are journals where they would require you $50, $60, $200 submission fees. European Journal of Finance, JBFA, for example, they would require you some submission fee. International Review of Financial Analysis, and your submission would not be processed if you don't pay the submission fee. And usually, if you have international co-authors, I would ask them to see if their university can pay the submission fee. So, for example, in Nottingham University, our university is encouraging to submit to journals where the university would be able to pay the fee. So basically, fund is available to support us. But if no fund is available, and the submission fee is minimum, you can share with the co-authors if you want to publish in top ranking journals. And again, this is a very personal perspective. It's these days, it's very fashionable to use multiple databases in a paper. So you have seen papers where out of the 17 variables, 4 are coming from Bordex, 4 from Bloomberg, 4 from DataStream, just as an example, 4 from WRDS. And if you put a table like a variables and definition table, where you have all these multiple databases reported for extracting the data, you are giving a very good signal to the journal that you have worked very hard in collecting your data from multiple sources. So this is something just as a point, because as I mentioned, the landscape is changing, so you need to be up to the mark. In cross-country studies, this is one of our paper in the British Journal of Management. These days, people like cross-country studies. As I mentioned, in 80s, 90s, it was very common to publish papers only on the US market, only on the UK market. But the global economic dynamics have changed. The world is not only the UK, the world is not only the US. Journals are now receptive to submissions from developing countries. Journals are now run by editors from the developing countries, reviewed by the editors from the developing countries. Things are changing. So when it comes to data collection, I would try to include a cross-country focus. As I mentioned, it's being an acceptable norm now to have more countries' data. And again, this is a personal reflection from own publications. People like, when you read the paper, you like those fancy diagrams, frameworks, and you can use different softwares to develop these type of frameworks for your published articles. And this is something conceptual framework that you can basically do it for any type of paper. It's not difficult. It is helping the reader to understand your topic in a more user-friendly way, basically. So I would try to include a conceptual framework in my paper. I do it in majority of my papers, have a conceptual framework. And this is the other thing I like when I ask my co-authors, I asked them, can you write a table of literature review? And it helps young researchers, PhD students, to understand the academic discourse, how it has developed over the time in chronological order. And again, table of literature review is something, it's, so you have a paper where you got basically, say, for example, 4 tables: descriptive statistics, correlation, regressions. It's very, very simplistic. You need to add things to make it more attractive to the reader. And you need a catchy title for your papers. I have given some examples here, but obviously people use fancy words, different things in the title. And one of our papers title, we agreed to reduce. It's a too long title. I still don't like it. It is published, but it's how it is basically. So you need to, because this paper would appear on your profile, on your CV for the rest of your life. Even when you retire, it would be there on Google Scholar. People would read it, and it's good to give attention to these minor things. Now, here are some important things to consider, which we have basically already discussed. But is there any question on what we have discussed so far?
Yes, Subhan.
Yeah.
There are a few questions in the chat. Let's see.
Yeah. Let me see.
There's a question in terms of the rejection from one of the audience.
Yeah.
On average, what is the rejection rate?
Yeah. Busy in principle, it is not going to process with it. I wanted to ask, what would be possible reason for rejecting a paper? If I send an email that reviewers are busy, in principle, editor is not going to process with it. Okay, so this is, it seems usually very top ranking journal won't send you an email like that. It depends what journal you have chosen. Good journals would basically reject a paper and will give you some good reasons as well. So if you look into top accounting and finance journals, like the Accounting Review, the Contemporary Accounting Research, even if you reject, if the paper is rejected, you receive 3-4 pages long feedback, and that feedback is quite helpful. So in this situation, I would basically look for a different outlet. I won't waste time in basically following with the journal editors. I will, because there are so many other journals, so I won't sit on the paper. I would send it somewhere. Yeah. Okay. Now.
Yeah, Subhan.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
the following that question, there's another question about the average rate of rejection.
Okay, sorry. The rate of rejection. Okay, the rate of rejection. I mean, different journals have a different rate of rejection. The top journals, they have very high rate of rejection. And obviously the poorly ranked journals, their acceptance rate, I would say acceptance rate is very higher. So it depends which journals you're talking about. I would see the information on the journal website before sending it there. But obviously rejection rate, we should not be discouraged. As I mentioned at the very beginning, rejection is part of the game. And you should keep trying. If a journal is free, but remember, you don't need to exhaust all your options, because there are limited journals and there are limited number of reviewers in the field. Your paper may be sent to the same people if it is rejected and you didn't consider the feedback. So because the journals, they are using these algorithms to find reviewers. Say, for example, the Elsewhere publisher, if you are editor and you're looking for a reviewer, and you look for, say, for example, area like sustainability. So that person name would come on the top and the paper would be sent to him or her. So I think it's important to see those statistics on the journal website. And they vary from journal to journal. Yeah. Okay, so is there any other question, Tom? In the
I
chat?
think there's one more question about whether you can name some journals, some good journal where we can publish for free.
Okay. Accounting and auditing. So our own journal, the International Journal of Finance and Economics, we have a corporate governance team now. So this accounting auditing topic, if it involves econometrics, if it involves large data sets, then I would say International Journal of Finance and Economics is also a good forum to try. It's free to submit to these journals. And there are other journals where they would charge very nominal fees, like $50, $100. If you got 4 co-authors and you want to still try it, there is no harm in sharing the cost between the institution or between the co-authors. But I won't try to publish, as I mentioned, in journals charging $2,000 or something like that. Yeah. Okay. Okay, now the introduction section, I don't know how much time we are aiming for in R. So I would be quick. I think your introduction sections need a good contribution related discussion, highlighting the theoretical, empirical, methodological contribution of the papers. You need some good citation in the very first paragraphs from their journals, and you need a good justification for choosing the country or the context. And in the literature review, obviously you need to write a good story there. You need to engage with the previous academic debate. You need a good theoretical framework section. If it is missing, that's basically a weakness in business research. People would highlight it, whether reviewers or editors. Multiple theories these days, people are using more than 2 theories, and they're all coming from different disciplines. And you need to find a good gap in the literature when you write the literature review section. So I would be a bit quick on these slides. In the methodology section, as I mentioned, the sources of data is important. Whether you are using cross-sectional panel time series data, are you using appropriate models or not? Why you have used a particular time period, 5 years data? Why you have used 3 years data? For each variable, you need very good empirical justification. The method you are using, you also need justification from the literature. And you also need to explain how you derived the final sample. You can't say we got 4,000 companies data from 20 countries. Steps, explain the steps in a tabular form. And when you are writing the finding sections, this is the weak point that I have personally seen, particularly with PhD students, that those findings are only described, only interpreted without linking them with the hypothesis, with the literature, with the theory, and without discussing the implications of those findings. So that's again very important for the finding sections. And obviously, before you submit, proofread your paper, request your friend, your supervisors, your previous teacher to read and give you informal feedback, and always decide who is going to be what when it comes to the order of co-authorship, because you don't want to fight, particularly if you are in different countries. So handling revisions, the last part, but as I mentioned, I would be quick. If you got revisions from good journals, cool down for a week or so, take your time to read the decision letter, understand the comments, and then agree on who is going to do what. This is important. If you are the first author, it doesn't mean you would be doing all the revisions all the time. You divided the points between the co-authors. And if you are struggling, we got different circumstances, always ask for an extension. Write an email to the editor. Can we get 3 weeks extension, 1 month extension? And many journal would give you an extension these days. And when you write a revised paper, try to use a track version of the paper so that the reviewer and editor can see that what changes you have done to the paper. Prepare a good response letter highlighting how you have addressed the issue in which section and on which page, so that the reviewers, they are busy people, they are people like you, me, they don't have a lot of time, so that they can easily see the revisions and can make their mind whether to accept or give you further revision. And this is an example of the revision response letter. Just an example, I said different people use different styles, so I won't impose my way of working. But you mention the name of the paper, the journal, the submission number, and you write the reviewer comment on one side, the response on the other side, and write a detailed response to each point, how you address, where you address, and do signposting when you write. Few things not to do, and I would be quick here. Writing emails to the editor again and again. The editors are usually professors. They would be head of departments, heavy admin role. They're receiving hundreds of email every week. So if you keep chasing, you are annoying them. You just basically, you don't need to do that. And if you are ignoring your reviewers, they got this power to basically reject the paper and not giving attention to basic grammatical mistakes. Even the word is saying this letter is in red, and you ignored it basically. So that's also not good thing to do. In submitting a paper to 2 journals at the same time is a big mistake. Never do that, because these journals are interconnected. They know in the system that this publisher elsewhere would know that this is also submitted to Wiley publisher. So don't do that. And similarity is again an issue, plagiarism. Try to check, test before submission. Patience is important, and I'm giving you an example. We got a rejection last year after nearly 5 years, 4 rounds of revisions. So a paper was rejected from a very good journals after 4th round and after 5 years. I didn't write an email to the editor showing my anger because I need to submit to that journal again. So if you do that, you basically, people would know somebody from Nottingham sent a nasty email. so don't do that. And as you can see, if you look into some papers, some are published quickly, others takes 1 year, 2 years, and that revision process can sometimes be very, very painful. And again, you can see one of my photo here. Expose your work to your colleagues, present in your department, in your university, in national conferences, in international conferences. Don't hide your paper in your computer. Present it to other people. Different people have different opinions. You would get positive feedback, and sometimes people giving you feedback might be your potential reviewers. And finally, as you can see that you see people having lots of publications. We see the one side, the success side. We don't see the lot of sacrifices, the hard work they do, the pain they go through it. We need to appreciate it. And universities also need to appreciate it by rewarding those academics who are working hard. So if you are in a leadership position in 10, 15 years time, you should know that somebody is working hard, somebody is publishing. So that person need to be rewarded. His work or her work should be recognized. Finally, work and choose your co-author very, very carefully. If somebody sent you email from somewhere that they want to work with you, search their Google profile. That person exists, where that person has published. Don't randomly work with anybody, knowing somebody might have used somebody data, somebody idea, and have come back with you, and you publish the paper, and after this is just an example. I mean, this paper is not the case like that, but papers are retracted from top ranking journals, and that damages your reputation, your career, you lose your job. Uh, if that something like this happens, basically you lose your job in I would say in minutes or in hours if this happens, because your university is informed that this is what the journal has decided, there was an unethical activity. So there is a happy side of it, but we need to be very, very careful when we are working with people. We should know those people as well. We should have some information about them, about their working style, and about their, I would say, the ethical side as well. So finally, when you have your paper accepted, you need to let your friends, your family members, your co-authors, your faculty members, friends in the network know that you have published, and you need to celebrate it. And that means that enjoy the celebration when a good paper is accepted in a good journals. And we are all working hard, but we should enjoy those small moments as well when we get that happy moment of a week or so that it can give you some more boost for the future. Finally, when you have a paper accepted, do share it on social media platforms. There are various platforms so that people, policymakers, you can take organizations as well, like United Nations, and I mean, I'm just giving you an example. Obviously, you don't need to do that. Policy making bodies in your country, businesses, NGOs. It means people would know that something has published in that area, and they can read your work. They can learn from it, because what we publish, there are millions of papers published so far, but how many are read by the managers, by the people in the business world? So this is in the other side, that you can share a copy with somebody you know working in the industry, in the regulatory body, and make your work visible. Put it in open access copy on SSRN, so that people in developing countries who cannot access these journals because of the higher subscription fees, they can easily access this recently published paper. Don't just keep it to yourself once it is published. Why you are worried? So I would put all my paper on ResearchGate so that it can be instantly downloaded and people can benefit from it. Last slide is on research impact. Because there was impact and I was struggling to find time for it. I think it's not only about publishing and producing papers. You need to be engaging with these stakeholders, with the regulatory bodies. You need to be organizing conferences, webinars like that, talking to people, sharing your ideas, your experience, what is in your mind. Organizing public events, public dialogues, so that people, so that your research output is also informing policy and the ongoing debate on a particular issue. And people, they write policy briefs, short media stories. You can write a simple newspaper articles in your own language, in your own country. In a small newspaper newspaper in a small district. It shouldn't be the Guardian in the first instance, CNN. That would be great. But if you're struggling to get it there, publish it somewhere where you think somebody would be comfortable accepting your idea, and you would gradually move on. It's like a transition. And you can have you can use different channels to disseminate your research. People write methodology brief. Other people are using it, citing it, writing toolkits, guidelines. You have data sets which is available on your website. People are using it, replicating it. And most importantly, when it comes to impact, basically, you write for policy making bodies in developing policy guidelines. And this is from University of Auckland, so I'm citing the source here. In two examples of impact, we have one project which is on the natural resource curse. It was published on Ghana, and it appears on the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative website. It's a global transparency bodies for countries with rich oil and natural resources. It's a 57 countries consortium, and they are developing international standards. So our paper now appears on this website. And then we have also done a project where we have developed a training toolkit for the non-government organizations in Pakistan and elsewhere in developing countries, where they can use the toolkit in engaging with women in conflict zones. So these are other things that you have to consider beside publications if you want your work to be visible internationally. Most importantly, this is a very important slide. I was preparing it last night and I asked my daughter to come in and see it. This is about research where you have seen people very crazy about research. They are very top researchers. They have published in top ranking journals. They have published, they have citation 50, 60,000, but they don't have a family life. So this is very important that you give time to your family, to yourself. If you sit on this chair for 8 hours a day or 12 hours a day consecutively, you don't do exercise, don't walk, very soon you would have health problems. So it's important that you do the exercise, keep yourself physically fit, because if you are not physically fit, then what's the point of this research? If you got health problem, major serious health problems, then there is no point. Obviously, whatever faith we follow, we practice and pray, and that's something very, very important. Family comes first, and I would say research comes afterwards. Yes, so that's all about the session. I think it went a bit longer. I'm sorry for that, more than 1 hour, 10 minutes more over the time. But any question, comment from the participant? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Subhan, for very insightful research and webinar keynote speak. I think now time we can have the interactive discussion, sharing. One of a very interesting part. I'm particularly interested in the part about your keynote speak on the international collaboration, as well as some other point along the line, how we can prepare the good publication plan when we submit the journal. And particularly the last point, very important, that and we need to work-life balance.
Yes, work-life balance is very important.
This week in Vietnam, I practiced your point very well.
That's very good. Yeah, so take breaks from work, summer break. I mean, I would take sometimes completely off, switch up your computer, and basically enjoy the holidays as well. Because if you work over holidays, the time would come when you retire and you say you haven't enjoyed your life. So what you will do with all these publications and these things? So yeah.
And thank you very much, Subhan. I think we may have a few questions in the chat, but before that, may I have a question in terms of the quantity and the quality of the research, because it depends on the period of time, depends on the career progress. For example, for PhD students before graduating, they want to have some papers so they can apply for jobs. So probably if we just focus on the quality, it may not have enough paper for them to apply for jobs. So what is your advice on that?
Okay, thanks, Tom. I think for PhD students, generally the expectation is that by the time you are near to completion, you have working papers which are either submitted to journals or that would be submitted to academic journals in few months' time. So if somebody is applying for a lecturer vacancy, I would like to see 2-3 papers under review in good journals. And I would also like to see a few new working papers or ideas which are in the initial development stage. It's not necessary to have a publication while you are doing a PhD, but it's good to tell the market that you are working on similar lines and you have a pipeline of papers. Some of those are under review or you are intending to submit in a couple of months' time. But if you have published like highest publication, that's good. It's it gives a good signal to the market that you know the system of how to publish, and that makes things much easier. But I won't publish in very poor quality journals as a PhD student, because people would make inferences that this is where you would be publishing if we recruit you. So I would be initially a bit selective, sending my articles to very good ranking journals. Yeah.
Thank you much, Subhan. It's really
Okay.
helpful.
Yes, you're welcome, Tom.
Any question from audience?
Okay. Ask question. This is the right forum to ask, and we are quite open to share experiences as a co-author, as a reviewer, as an editor. And one more important thing is that if a journal send you article for a review, do review so that you know what other people are working on. And you also tell the journals that you are supporting the journals in doing a good review. If you are not reviewing, if you decline a review request and in a week time you send to that journal, it won't make sense, because they would know you declined a request a week earlier and now you have submitted to this journal. So I would be very careful when review invitations are received.
Yeah, thank you, Subhan. One of the audience asked whether you can share the slide.
I think the session is recorded. So Tom, would you be sharing that with the participants?
Yes, the session is recorded, so we can share the recorded video after the presentation in our channels.
Yeah. Okay.
So I have a thought, not just a question, but it's also a question. So we know that given your keynote speak, we know that publication in impact and becoming critical these days, particularly for the international collaboration. But for instance, I have a chance. I have a very good chance to have acquired not very top, but very good international collaboration from my university in New Zealand, Australia, or the UK. For instance, working with you, Tâm and Vũ, some other author in UK and France. But frankly speaking, that somehow the PhD student, they normally follow the timeline of the supervisor.
Yeah.
But we believe that not only PhD student, but people all normally like to improve their networking as well as international
that's a very important point. That's very important. And there is a comment from one of my former student, Jin Lu. She's here in the session about how, as a student, you can find co-authors. And this is mainly about networking. You attend these sessions, you talk to people, you approach people doing research in your area, and you write courtesy emails to people afterwards. And that's how you start a follow-up process in building this research co-authorship relationship, and it should be a very long-term, obviously, relationship. It's not like you publish a paper and that's you basically disappeared. Just giving you an example, like of hi, we have published, now we have arranged this session. So it's very important that we talk to people. We attend national, international conferences, workshops, and we use social media. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's a very good point, and particularly we don't know whom we will publish with, and
Yeah.
how we can, whether we can become a good author or not.
Yeah.
I think we just have a choice, and if we find a good author, we can extend along the way, step by step.
Yeah.
And but that would be challenging, and we need to be very ambitious.
Yes. Yeah. And I think at some point, if you feel your co-authors they are not meeting your expectation, there is always a way to find a new team of researchers and try to, because it's up to you, because you don't want to be putting a lot of pressure on yourself. Otherwise, if you stay with the same team and you are not happy, then you may be producing, but you are not enjoying research. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
Can I have this one question?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very curious because I have a lot of my friends do research in, microbiologies and some kind of sciences, and they always ask me about the percentage of research in accounting and finance and economic in general. In reality, in practice, which is the industry, and the authority use our research in practice. Like, do you have any idea about how many percentage of our research? Because usually I know that like most of our publication used by the fellow research fellow, which is like contribute, build up the literature and you work on theories. So the literature, the theory contribution is obviously compared with practical ones. So usually we have some suggestion for authorities, but what happened behind and beyond our implication, I don't really know yet. So
okay, it's a good question. And especially for young researchers, we are very different from medical sciences. This is something, I mean, when we are making a comparison, I think we have to do apple comparison rather than apple-orange comparison, because in pure sciences or applied sciences, the experiments they do is very different than what we do here in social sciences. Not all social sciences outputs are leading to impact. This is one of the issue, but I would give you one example. In last few weeks, we have colleagues in Nottingham University, in Southampton, and in Essex University. They are doing corporate governance research. They have publications in area of corporate governance, and they developed a national corporate governance code for Ghana. So this is a big development from a policy making perspective, that you do a research which is directly leading to policy implications. But majority of the social science research is not leading to policy implication, and this is one of the issue with social science research. But now, if you look into the, say, for example, in accounting, we have the international sustainability standards coming into force. The International Accounting Standard Board, the ISSB, International Sustainability Standard Board, was established. And some of the board members are accounting academics. And so it means you are sitting there as an academic to contribute to the standard development. Similarly, accounting standards were developed, academics were sitting there. So their own research was directly leading to policy-based implications. So it depends basically what topic you are choosing and whether that topic has any relevance to the society and to the policy making bodies or not. So again, percentage, I don't have, unfortunately, any data, but I would say it's very minimum. Yes, you are right, but there are examples where accounting academics have contributed to the policy. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the
Okay.
answer.
Okay, no problem. You're welcome. Okay. Any final questions there? Tom, you are muted. Yeah.
Thank you, Subhan. Sorry for that.
Yeah.
I think we have really run out of time, so
Okay.
there is a time for the last question if anyone wants to ask.
I actually not the example. I just would like to add your opinion in how in the way we apply the research in teachings.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, you know, it's really hard for me to deliver the lecture with the deep insights research
Yeah.
to help students understand the concepts. So,
Yeah.
and that I'm not sure whether my student like interested in some kind of like, you know,
I see. Yeah.
anything like that. So, yeah, and I think I joined in the conference, and that one is the topic that people discuss a lot regarding the connection between the industry, research, and the student.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how about your opinion in
Yeah, that's a
the
very
way?
good point. Very good point. When you are teaching on a particular topic, I think research-led teaching is a very good terminology I would use here for new academics. We need to share articles with our students, but we should share those articles which can easily be digested by the students. If we share an article which we cannot understand, how a student would understand those articles? So I always try to use article which is written in a simple language, which is a conceptual paper, where student can get some insights, because undergraduate students, for example, they hate econometrics. If you share papers with algorithms, with mathematical derivations in an accounting class, they won't understand. So I would like to spend some time in choosing a good paper which is on a theme, but which is easy to follow for the students. And there are so many on the Google Scholar to find. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
I'm trying. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Okay.
Yeah. Because sometimes at some point, I think the student is more interested in some kind of industry experience
Yeah.
and be very practical. And then when we start to deliver some kind of like research thing, yeah, it's quite, you know, it depends though on
Yeah.
the which year you are working with, the
Yeah.
year you're working with
Yeah.
students, for example, in the final years, and they are go through all the concept already.
Yeah.
So it's easier for to give them some example and some research,
Yeah.
and you motivate them to
Yeah.
do some research and work on the
Yeah.
data analysis properly.
Yeah.
But not for the high school student, the
Yeah.
freshman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, Owen, for the question. And thank you again, Dr. Subhan, for sharing the insightful presentation, a lot of knowledge and experience from you as an editor, as a reviewer, and then as a scholar as well. So I learned a lot from your presentation, and I think everyone will be benefit from your presentation as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom, Hi, and all the participants for listening to me for more than 1 hour. I was talking. So it's great. Hopefully there would be some benefit of it, and hopefully we would engage with each others in developing research, a good research culture.
Thank you,
Okay.
thank you so much. Before we